And welcome back to another episode of the Corner Office. Here we are again after March Madness. Some would consider it March Sadness. I honestly think that, overall in the bracketology realm, I did all right this year, which is something that I don't normally say. I know my co-host did not do nearly as well this year as I did. But just looking back on the tournament and, all the great times and memories that we've had throughout the whole thing, I mean, it's pretty spectacular that, we got to experience another great year of March.
Yeah, I think that in terms of my personal bracket, it didn't go well at all. But if we're talking about our bracket that we made on the show, I think that it actually did pretty okay.
Yeah, we did fine.
Yeah,
we did fine. We missed big on some, but
like our national champion.
but we had fun. We had fun nonetheless. So I mean, first order of business, I think you just have to kind of deconstruct some of these games that we watched over the last weekend. Starting with the Final Four, I would say Purdue NC State was the first game that happened that night, and I kind of think we called exactly what happened in that game. Over the course of our discussion on the game before we got into the UConn-Alabama game the other day, we were like, okay, we both think that Purdue is probably too dominant for this NC State team, and if their bigs get into early foul trouble, there will be a very big problem for them going forward. And that's kind of the tale of what happened in that first half, even though it was still very competitive until the second half where NC State just forgot how to shoot the basketball.
Yeah, we talked about how the game was going to go one of two ways. Either, NC State was going to keep it close and it was going to be down to the wire, or they were going to pick up the fouls with their big men early and then it was going to be a runaway. And unfortunately, it was the latter. And DJ Burns sitting early wasn't helpful. He picked up 2 fouls in the first 5 or 6 minutes, I think, and missed a lot of the first half. So, I mean, credit to them for even sticking in it without him there. I didn't think that Edey proved to be as favorable of a matchup for him as we may have thought, and he did only have 8 points.
Yeah.
But you can't really point the finger there. NC State throughout the game really just didn't shoot the ball well.
Agreed.
And Purdue just kind of, once they get that momentum under their feet, they can really stomp on your throat and really kill a team in the water. And I think that that's kind of what they did.
And I think that although NC State had a really good chance at this game because their guard play was much better than Purdue's throughout the entire thing, aside from Fletcher Lawyer, who played very well. Braden Smith had probably his worst game of the tournament against NC State, and DJ Horn in the first half was really keeping them in it.
Yeah, he had 13 in the first half.
But without DJ Burns in the game, that scoring load just kind of diminished. Casey Morsell had a really poor game for NC State, which is unfortunate because you need him to be shooting the ball better in order to stay in a game like that. And ultimately, the dominance of Zach Edey just kind of took over. And not making big shots down the stretch really hurt NC State. And I think as much as people wanted to see NC State continue this magical run, Purdue was the team that was going to stop them.
Yeah, I honestly don't think that there's that much to talk about in that game.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it happens every year at the end of a Cinderella run. You do hate to see it. But moving to the UConn versus Alabama game, kind of went exactly how everyone thought that it was going to go. I would
push back on that, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, Alabama played very well in the first half.
I agree.
I think that they played, I mean, at basement level A- basketball. I thought they looked really good.
Yeah.
And then it's really hard for a team like UConn to come out and, once you go to that halftime break, sometimes in big moments, teams that aren't quite as good come out a little flat in the second half, and that's not something that you can afford to do against UConn. And unfortunately, it just didn't go Alabama's way.
Agreed. I mean, I think that I was really impressed, even though UConn was able to open up this game at the end. I really didn't think this game was going to be close, nearly as close as it was for the entirety of it. I think that is a big deal for Alabama fans going forward because you're returning your entire starting lineup to Tuscaloosa. So you're getting guys like Grant Nelson and Nick Pringle and Mark Sears. Rylan Griffin and Sam Walter, all these guys, they're coming back to school, so they're going to be a very dangerous team. And we're going to talk about some coaching changes in a little bit, but I think Nate Oates is going to stay your coach, which is a good thing for your program.
Well, they just locked him up for the next 5 years.
Correct. So all of those things are pointing to signs of success in Tuscaloosa, and they kept it a lot more competitive until those final couple of minutes with the UConn team that really ran away with every game they played this year, which I think leads us into the national championship game, where obviously the UConn Huskies defeat the Purdue Boilermakers. And this game was, to me, it kind of went exactly how I was expecting it to, for a couple of reasons that I'll get into after I want to hear you speak and give your take on it. But like, these were the two best teams in college basketball all year, and this was touted as going to be, the best game that we saw all year, and ultimately UConn wins 75-60 in dominant fashion. But I want to get your take on what you thought about this game.
So it was a great first half.
Yep.
Yeah, I know that UConn went into it with a 6-point lead. They're up 36-30 at the half. Mm-hmm. Really thought that UConn's guard play, especially in the early stages of the game, was what kind of brought them to, get their feet under them and start to play their type of basketball. UConn looked very dysfunctional, in my opinion, compared to what they normally are at the start of that game. I don't know if it was nerves or what. Edey came out and had 11 in the first 10 minutes.
Yep.
As we all thought that he would. But then I believe Cam Fletcher, I believe his name is.
Cam Spencer.
I'm sorry, Cam Spencer. He had 6 quick points at the start of the game, one of which was a shot over Zach Edey, which I think ultimately was big because it was like, okay, we actually can score on this guy. Yeah, and then a bunch of guys started to get downhill and finish around the rack, which they didn't look confident in doing at the start of the game. And so I think that was huge for UConn. But obviously, going into half, very close game. You come out in the second half, and you made this point when we were watching the game. Zach Edey looked tired, and he proved to be tired. He shot 11 for 21, which by his splits are not great numbers, especially when you're finishing around the rim. Which is, in my opinion, it seems to reflect the fact that you're playing against a guy who's defensively up to the closest to your standard that you've seen all season and potentially in your college career.
Right.
And that it did show down the stretch in that game. So ultimately, UConn, better fitness. Danny Hurley has them running up and down the stadium in practice. Better fitness, better decisions in big moments, and that's what ultimately led to them being national champions.
I agree with a lot of what you just said. I think that the point about Dan Hurley is very important. I think that he outcoached Matt Painter for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is if you go back and you watch the FDU Purdue game from last season, UConn did exactly the same strategy. They just exemplified it on a grander scale. The idea was that Dan Hurley wanted to trade 2s for 3s with Purdue. Basically, the idea is, Zach Edey is going to get his inside. If we can make him shoot less efficiently than he normally does, we'll be okay. But guys like Mason Gillis and Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith and Trent Kaufman-Renn, like these guys can't get buckets. And Dan Hurley was like, if we hold their players aside from Edey to under 20 points, we will win the game. And I think Mason Gillis, Fletcher Lawyer, and they combined for less than 20 points. You know what I mean? Like, so they executed flawlessly what the plan was. Another thing is that UConn's defense held Purdue to 7 3-point attempts the entire game.
They had one in the first half.
One in the first half. This is one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country because when Zach Edey gets doubled in the post, he usually looks to kick out and you have shooters and they knock down shots. So like those open looks were very much cut down upon. And then when they did go to double Zach Edey in the second half because Donovan Clingan was sitting with foul trouble, so they had Alex Caravan guarding him and they had Samson Johnson guarding him, who both probably couldn't keep up with him as Donovan Clingan could. They had not shown the double all game. And when it happened, they got quick turnover, lead the break. That's where UConn's at their best.
Right, and that's where Zach Edey started to get tired. There's a set amount of times that a guy can get the ball in the post and go up with it.
Right.
And for him, that number was pretty close to 30 if you count the amount of post-ups that he had that either resulted in him not getting a shot off or him turning the ball over. It was probably pretty close to 30, if not higher than that.
Right.
And he just looked tired to me.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that he couldn't keep up with the pace of play as much. But the most important thing that happened in this game was UConn's, we talked about it all year, is that Purdue's guard play was going to decide any game that they played. If their guards played well, they were in games. If their guards played poorly, they were out of games. Braden Smith had a very good first half. His second half was very poor. And obviously holding these guys like
I will say Braden Smith had trouble bringing the ball up the floor.
Correct, because he was pressured by guys who were Lance
Three-quarter
Jones.
court,
Lance
yeah.
Jones was another guy who had a really poor game by his standards, because you're being pressured by guys like Tristan Newton, who is going to be a first-round draft pick this year. You got guys like Cam Spencer, who's 6'4". Tristan Newton's 6'6". The smallest guy on the court for UConn is Hassan Diarra, and he's 6'3". Like, their guards are big, and they're very consistent. Tristan Newton's a first-team all Big East player. Like, these guys have been consistently good all year, and UConn's guard play is what has brought them into games. Purdue's guard play is what has shot them out of games.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for some numbers, to throw some numbers at you. Yeah. Purdue's guards, Fletcher Lawyer went 0 for 5. He only took 1 3-pointer.
Okay.
Which is, huge for a spot-up shooter.
Agreed.
Braden Smith had 12 points. He had 1 3-pointer and went 4 for 12 from the field. Not great splits for him either.
Agreed.
Lance Jones, 1 3-pointer, only took 3 shots and only had 5 points.
Right.
So Gillis, no points, 1 3-pointer, 2 field goals. These guys weren't even taking shots in the national championship game. And we saw that Dan Hurley was bringing this strategy at them from the minute the tip-off happened.
From the jump. So
to bring up coaching, back to your point. Why doesn't Matt Painter sit them down in the locker room and schematically come up with something? We talked about this during the game.
Yeah.
I told you, who's to say that he doesn't come up with a way to free up these shooters and get some points?
Agreed.
And he didn't. And it was very surprising to me for a coach who is supposedly one of the best in the country, is supposedly worthy of winning a national championship, in the biggest moment didn't do a glaringly obvious change.
I think that the thing is that Dan Hurley was able to beat Purdue with their bread and butter, which is like all year long, Purdue basketball has been built on the idea of getting the ball to Zach Edey on the low post and playing off him. And when he scores, they win. And when he doesn't score, they lose. So like from Painter's idea, he was way too comfortable trading these 2-point baskets with 3-point baskets on the other side, because UConn was shooting the ball better than normal. They're only a 28% 3-point shooting team going into this game,
which isn't painfully below average.
Horrible.
For college. Yeah,
it's not horrible. It's not stellar.
They only shot 27% this game.
But again, this is a team that just beat an Alabama team in the last round who shot over 50% from 3. Like, that's just how dominant their offensive game has been this year. Is just like they have that X factor, that thing that makes them that much better. And you need to have a perfect game in order to beat this UConn team, or even keep a game competitive with this UConn team when they're getting rolling in March like this. And Purdue's guards just did not perform.
No, they didn't. And I'm not to say I'm surprised.
Yeah.
And Zach Edey wasn't the only guy tired. First of all, UConn's bench is a little bit deeper than Purdue's bench.
For sure.
Purdue is a team that is 6, maybe 7 guys deep at best.
Yep.
UConn is, they had 8 guys, maybe 9 on the floor.
But they're also the best conditioned team in the country.
And it's not even close. It's a
glaring.
far margin between them and number 2. So they can continue to pick you up at 3/4 court.
Yeah.
And make you isolation dribble all the way down the court. And Purdue was not doing a good job of freeing up their guards.
And that shortens up the shot clock.
Shortens the shot clock.
You have to run
and then you're fatigued.
Correct.
And if they come down and score a quick bucket, you're spending half of the game trying to get the ball up the court.
I agree.
Purdue went to the full court press with about 6 minutes left and got absolutely diced. And I didn't think that it was a great call for Matt Painter. I know that you don't have very many options at that point, but when your team is as fatigued as then, yeah, there's other ways to throw defense at them than a lazy press, and that's what I thought that they were.
If UConn wanted to score on that press, they could have scored any time.
Every time.
They were stepping into the front court with 2 players versus Zach Edey in the middle, and that could have been a layup.
I remember there was a possession with 6 minutes left. They dragged out the entire shot clock.
Yep.
Got an offensive rebound.
Yep.
Dragged out the shot clock again and ended in the 3-pointer. And I said that was the best possession of time and
score.
Time and score that I've seen in college basketball this year. It was very, very good. Very well done.
They executed their strategy perfectly. This team is at the pinnacle of college basketball right now. Obviously, they're losing a lot of pieces next year, which is going to be interesting to see how Dan Hurley chooses to rebuild.
But who's to say that he's not one of the best recruiters in the country right now?
Everyone
wants to go play for a team that's winning like they are.
I agree.
That's why, in my opinion, right now, Dan Hurley is the best coach in college basketball.
Okay.
I don't know who you would throw up against him in terms of everything having to do with the game.
Yeah.
He's now won 2 in a row, which is something that hasn't been done since the Florida Gators that were coached by Billy Donovan.
Billy Donovan. Yep, Billy Donovan.
I don't see Hurley making the jump to the NBA anytime soon. I see him sticking around.
He's not leaving the program. He's gonna stay at UConn.
So he's here to stay, and so is this UConn team. In my opinion, it may not be next year, it may not be the year after, but college basketball dynasties aren't something that happens in a 3 to 4 year stretch. They take place over a long period of time. We've seen it at UNC, we've seen it at Duke.
Yep.
And now I think that we're starting to see the beginning of it at UConn. Yep. So I think that we're on the threshold of a new clear-cut number one blue blood.
Okay.
And everyone else better watch out for it. And so transitioning into the next topic, you talked about Nato to Alabama.
Yep.
And he's been rumored to take over the spot of Kentucky. And having to do with the departure of John Calipari, which was initially announced a couple days ago, but was formally announced by the school and Calipari today.
And it was also announced to predate that Cal was going to be going back to Kentucky. And then a week later, we have the news breaking that he has accepted a job to take over the Arkansas Razorbacks program. So I think first and foremost, I want to get your initial take on. I think everybody thinks that this move is a really good one for Arkansas. Obviously, you lose Eric Musselman to the USC job, probably a better location. But why do you think this departure of John Calipari happened? Do you think that it was all smoke and mirrors when Kentucky said that they were going to have him back, or that he was, excited to stay? I don't. It kind of came out of nowhere, I feel like, and no one was really expecting it. And do you think it's just because of lack of tournament success, or what was the reason for the change?
I mean, we've talked about it on the show before. I've thought that he's on the hot seat now for 3 years.
Yep.
We talked about it, I believe, 2 episodes ago.
Yep.
I think that Calipari coming out and saying that he's excited to stay is different than the school being like, we're hiring him or we're going to keep him around, right? Like, vastly different. So obviously he's excited to stay in Kentucky. They were never going to fire him. And this isn't necessarily what I agree with, but I think that it's the only reasonable explanation for what happened. I think that it was more like a go find another job. We're not going to fire you, but we are going to look for a change in coaching. And then he decided that Arkansas was his spot. Like, I don't really see, yes, it's the best option available right now, but I don't really see the appeal to going to be the coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks. You're staying in the same conference. Yeah. You're downgrading the team that you're playing for.
Agreed.
You're downgrading the strength of recruitment that you have, because obviously it's not the same as it was at Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And you're filling in the shoes of a guy that everyone in Arkansas loved in Eric Musselman, as a guy that everyone in Arkansas hated because they played them for so many years.
Yep.
In Cal. So I just don't really see why they would do this at all.
At Arkansas?
I believe that they hate John Calipari at Arkansas.
I don't think they will after they get this recruiting class.
No, probably not. But as a fan of a team, you look at a rival team's coach, and you don't like them.
Okay.
And Calipari has been beating the Arkansas Razorbacks for 14 years now.
Yep.
Why would they have any reason to be like, oh, yeah, I love Calipari, let's bring him in? Especially after having a guy in Eric Musselman who gets up on the scorer's table with his shirt off, whipping it around in the fan section after they get a huge win. They loved Eric Musselman.
Yeah, and I think Eric Musselman was great for their program. But
I think that he'll be great at USC as well.
I do too. But that being said, they had a poor season this year. Obviously, he wanted to change the scenery. And getting a guy like John Calipari in your program is a good thing if you are a team. Despite what anybody...
It's not a bad move for Arkansas. Agreed. It's a great move for Arkansas.
Agreed.
I just don't see the appeal for Calipari.
I don't either. But I also don't know how many available coaching jobs he would have looked at. I don't know why, if he was
not wait a year?
Why, if you were leaving Kentucky, you wouldn't announce that after the Oakland loss and then take a job like USC like Eric Musselman did. Or take one of those big openings that was going to happen. That I don't understand. But the most important part of this entire discussion, I think, is who is going to take over that Kentucky position. Because Jack and I were texting about this before we got on the episode, and we were trying to list out the jobs that we think were the most valuable in all of college basketball, historically, that being. The Kentucky job is one of the best jobs in the country. It just
Absolutely.
flat out is. It flat out is. You have a historic program in a pretty good location. I mean, people want to go there. People want to play. It's a blue blood. It's been historically great. So, like, if you are a mid-table SEC coach, mid-table high major coach, are you not seriously considering taking this Kentucky job?
I think that there's a extensive list of guys.
Yeah.
Including, in my opinion, I think that Dusty May would have been on there had he not taken the Michigan job.
Okay.
Who would have dropped everything to go be the coach of Kentucky.
Yep.
There are maybe 4 schools above it as of right now.
Yeah,
whose jobs are more valuable.
We had as the most valuable jobs being Duke, UNC, Kansas, Kentucky, USC, UCLA, UConn.
Yeah.
Those were the ones that we could come up with. But okay, so there's been an extensive list of candidates, and I want to know who you think is the top dog right now. Obviously, I'm leaving Nate Oates out of the picture right now because he just signed a massive extension. I don't think he's going to sign there.
I think it'd be foolish of Nate Oates to leave Alabama.
Certainly agree. You got Scott Drew from Baylor. He's the favorite right now to go to this position.
Sure. List them out, and I'll tell you my thoughts on the coaches.
Okay, you got
Scott Drew
from Baylor.
So Scott Drew, I don't think that he's looking at this Kentucky position thinking that it's all that great. It's not that much of an upgrade from where he's at.
Okay.
In my opinion, he's playing in a better conference in the Big 12.
Yep.
He's won a national championship at Baylor. And he has great recruiting. He's keeping a lot of guys from that Baylor team.
Yeah.
I don't understand why he would leave. I think he's in a very similar position to Nate Oates, except it's a better program historically, and he's won a national championship. And he's in a better conference.
I think he's in a worse position than Nate Oates just because Nate Oates is returning everyone, and Scott Drew's going to lose guys like Jacoby Walter.
But I mean, if you think about it from the past, from a standpoint of the past, Alabama's not as good of a team playing in a worse conference that hasn't won a national championship.
Okay.
And Scott Drew has all those things under his belt, and he has job security, which he most certainly would not have at Kentucky.
Good point. So you're out on Scott Drew. So talk to me about Bruce Pearl then.
I mean, I think that you have a lot of the same kind of arguments. Obviously, hasn't won a national championship.
Yep.
Plays in the same conference.
Yep.
You know, he'd have to go back to Auburn twice a year.
Yep.
However, Auburn in the past couple of years has looked great ever since they had that Jabari Smith team that went out way too early.
Well, even before that, they went to their first Final Four in 2019
with
the Kyle
Kessler,
Guy three-pointer.
Right.
No, that was before Walker Kessler. That was 2019. Walker Kessler was 2021, I want to say.
Same year that Baylor won. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. But,
okay.
Go on.
Regardless, I think that Bruce Pearl looks at that Kentucky job a lot more favorably than Scott Drew does.
Okay.
And I think that if he was offered the position, I think that he is on that list of guys who'd be very quick to take it. Interesting.
All right. Talk to me about Billy Donovan coming from the NBA and the Chicago Bulls to take this position.
So Billy Donovan's on the hot seat in Chicago. I think that that's very clear.
For sure.
However, historically speaking, he has done good work in the NBA.
I agree.
Going from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Chicago Bulls were a good team when they first got together. And now they're just not a good team.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't think that he would necessarily tarnish his legacy with the Florida Gators, being that those back-to-back champions, to go back and play again.
Back to college, you mean?
Go back to the SEC more specifically.
Yep.
I don't think that Billy Donovan is on that list of guys who would drop his job in the NBA, doing actually pretty good work in the NBA, to go back to college.
Okay. So out on Billy Donovan.
Billy Donovan.
Do you think Billy Donovan takes another NBA job?
If offered to him, yes.
And you think that would be head coaching or assistant coaching?
I think he has a better chance at assistant coaching than taking this Kentucky job.
You think he has a better chance?
I think that he would be great in the NBA, basically anywhere but Chicago.
Anywhere but Chicago.
I think the Chicago in the NBA is one of the worst places to play right now.
Okay. Just because of the
the construction, construction of the team, where they're at with their future. They don't have a great future down the line.
Interesting.
I think objectively they're not a favorable place to play right now.
All right. Talk to me about Brad Underwood of Illinois.
I think Brad Underwood's on that list of guys.
Okay.
Illinois is Big Ten, I believe.
Big Ten.
Illinois is Big Ten, out of conference. Illinois has been a great team. He's done great stuff with that team, but he hasn't done enough to have a legacy necessarily with Illinois. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
He, to me, seems like a coach who's looking to make a jump to a big school. And I think that this may be his opportunity.
Okay.
I think he's on that list of guys who would take the job if offered it. I am in.
You're in on so you're in on Brad Underwood?
I am, yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about TJ Otzelberger from the Iowa State Cyclones.
See, that's a tough one for me. I think that he's in a pretty similar boat.
Okay.
As Illinois. Just came off a great season. I think that this is his peak in terms of where he ends up next year. I think that people look at him. He's done great stuff with the Iowa Cyclones. They were a 2 seed this year. I think that his coaching value is peaking right now. So It's a good time for this Kentucky job to become available for him. I think that he's on the list of guys who would take the job. I'm in.
Interesting. All right. And finally, I just want to get your take on Shaka Smart.
You see, it's kind of a tough one for me.
Okay.
Because Marquette has been so good, right?
Yeah.
Marquette has been great over the last few seasons. They're playing in a great conference right now.
Yep.
And his recruiting pull seems to be pretty good. It, to me, honestly, doesn't feel like a gigantic jump to go from Marquette right now to Kentucky.
Yep.
And Marquette loves him. The fans there love him.
Agreed.
As any great coach would be. But I don't think I'm in or out on him. I think that if offered the job, he would take it. But I don't think that he's that likely to get the job offer.
Okay, interesting. I also think that Shaka Smart's biggest knock in the past couple of years has been his tournament success.
Exactly.
And I think that that's going to be an issue at Kentucky. But if you could give me one candidate right now that you think is the most prominent, if, you know, who is your prediction for them to hire at this point?
I would say, remind me of the coach from Illinois' name.
Brad Underwood.
I think that as of right now, logistically speaking, he is the favorite to take the Kentucky job, in my opinion.
Okay. Interesting. I'm personally going to go with Scott Drew. I think Scott Drew is the most likely to take the jump. He's obviously a guy who's had tournament success, and although he's built Baylor to be a very solid program, I think he will seriously consider the offer that Kentucky is going to make him, because it will be extensively more than he makes at Baylor.
So I think that it's foolish of us to not have talked about the women's Final Four as of right now. We should have. I transitioned too quickly to the coaching topic. I was excited to talk about it. I think that before we get too far, let's run over the Final Four games real quick, especially the one that went the way that we thought. South Carolina pulled away from NC State in the end of that game and just killed them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really think that we have to spend too much time talking about it. Talk to me about the call at the end of the UConn-Iowa game.
Okay, so obviously the big storyline here is that it was a 2-point game with UConn had the ball with 5 to 3 seconds left on the clock at that point. Obviously they were looking to get a final shot off down 72 to 60, maybe 71 to 69, something like that. Very close game either way. And they had the ball with an opportunity to get a final shot off against the Iowa Hawkeyes, who, I mean, UConn played fantastic defense on Caitlin Clark for the entire game. Nika Mule was all over her, held her to decently bad shooting for the entire thing. But obviously the play that everybody's talking about right now is Aaliyah Edwards sets an offensive foul of a screen on, I think it was Gabby Marshall. And they called the foul. It was a foul. It was a moving screen. And regardless of what your opinion of the call was at the time, it certainly was a foul, and they were trying to get Paige Beckers going off the screen to probably shoot a pull-up three, I would assume.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I'm just going to jump in here.
Go ahead.
I was expecting a much better play out of the timeout from Gino.
Agreed. I do too.
And yes, so Paige came off the screen quickly
Uh-huh.
and, instantly handoff, came back and got the ball. And that was where the moving screen was.
Yep.
I thought it took them too long to get into their motion.
Agreed.
Had they just come off, they would have either had a shot or something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not think that they ran that effectively from the jump, right when that ball got put into play.
Yeah.
I knew that something bad was going to happen. I did not think that it would be a moving screen.
Yeah, but that being said, here's where the argument is do you as a ref make the call against Elijah Edwards for the moving screen, which on replay was a moving screen, or do you let the players decide the game? And personally, as someone who has played in NCAA games before, I would want the players to decide the game at that stage. I don't think you can make that call because it's such a deciding call for the rest of the game of the tournament. I think everybody from a fan perspective at home was looking at it like, oh, I wish we would have got to see that final shot go up. You know what I mean? Like everybody wanted to see that go, and either have Iowa win because of their great defensive effort or have UConn win because of a fantastic shot or extend the game. Nobody wanted the game to end on a moving screen.
Right, and I agree with that. No one, especially if you'd been watching the whole time, you let that intensity build up, all the suspense builds up, and then it ends with this play that just kind of seems deflating, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a lack of execution. Good teams don't make plays like that. National championship teams don't make plays like that.
Agreed.
And especially in the biggest moment, A, it was an unnecessary moving screen.
Yeah.
B, if you don't set the screen, she just comes off and does something else. She's a generational ball handler.
Right.
So, I mean, look at it from a different sports perspective. Last year's Super Bowl, James Bradbury tugs Kadarius Toney in the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
The pass interference call ends the game. Was it a pass interference? Yes. It was a pass interference, which is why you can hate it as much as you want. And I hated it at the time, but it was a pass interference.
Right.
Think about a game of soccer, right? You're tied 1-1. You're in extra time. You're 20 seconds over.
Yep.
It's a one-on-one. You chop the legs out from under someone, and it's a penalty kick. Are you ever going to argue that it's not a penalty kick just because it was in the 91st minute?
Right. Because
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Right. So at the end of the day, it comes down to execution, which is why, yes, you can complain all you want about this call, but let's say they roll off and they hit a 3. Then the complaints are from Iowa fans about how they missed an egregious miss screen.
Agreed.
So it's a lose-lose for the referees, but at the end of
sure.
the day, you have to make the call.
Okay.
And it was a moving screen. Maybe if it wasn't as egregious of a moving screen, not only did she have her legs wider than her shoulders, but she also was using her arms to create the screen and create the movement.
Yep.
Had it been less of a flagrant moving screen, I think that you could get away with it. But in this situation, in my opinion, I do disagree with you. I think you have to call it.
All right. Fair enough. I think I like your point about retrospect and the fact that, although it was annoying at the time, when cooler heads prevail, you do understand the fact that, at that moment, that call had to be made. Shout out to Hannah Stolke in this game.
Yeah.
She was awesome.
She was great.
Probably their best player on the floor.
And 20 off the bench?
23. No, she's a starter, but certainly wasn't supposed to have 23.
Right. She has an extensive mid-range game. She actually had a couple good games leading into this, but kind of peaked in this game. That was
certainly the best game that she's played all year in the biggest moment. And then finally we get to the national championship where we have the undefeated South Carolina Gamecocks versus the greatest women's college basketball player of all time in Caitlin Clark. And although it was very competitive for the most part, South Carolina was just too much. Camila Cardoso was really good. Chloe Kitts played very well as well. Tahina Paopao, I don't know if I said that right, so please don't go after me. Was really good. And so was Tessa Johnson. This South Carolina team, a team that, had been dominant all year versus the one-man wrecking crew that was Iowa. And Caitlin Clark played a decent game. She had 30. She didn't shoot the ball particularly great. But I think it's the result that most people who watched women's college basketball for all of the year was expecting, because it was the better team versus the better player, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right.
It was kind of
and it was a great game until the end.
Agreed. So, yeah, I mean, I think the viewership of these two national championship games between the men and the women also dictated the fact that like everybody is now on watch about women's college basketball. Like,
absolutely. The ratings for a random college game on a Saturday night were higher than a Celtics Heat game on TNT.
Correct.
Which is impressive. And I think that I know that not all of them are done playing yet, but you do have to give a hats off to the class of 2020, the high school class of 2020.
Yeah.
Bringing in players like Paige Beckers, Caitlin Clark, Camila Cardoso, Angel Reese, Haley Van Lith,
Cameron Brink.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that it may be the best class of women's basketball that we've seen to date. I don't know really what would rival it.
I agree.
A lot of times you see one or two great players. To have 6 come out of the same class, all playing on the same USA team, it was pretty spectacular.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's great for the sport of women's college basketball. It's great for women's basketball as a whole. And hopefully we'll see this translate into the WNBA, a league that has been really struggling for viewership for the past couple of years. But with some of these big things that we've seen, like the Sabrina Ionescu versus Steph Curry 3-point contest and, the influence of media towards women's sports right now. I mean, I think that there's a reality where you see a lot more viewers to the WNBA in the years to come.
And I think for the first time in a long time, people will be able to, like just your casual fan, will be able to look at the WNBA draft board and know what's going on for the broad, at least the lottery. They will know a lot of the names in the lottery.
Right.
And that's big.
Right.
That creates hype around the next season, all these draft picks, and it's a huge step into making the game become full of household names.
I agree.
All right, so that wraps up our sports segment. We are going to end. It's been a couple of weeks since we last did a game, and I know that our Instagram Reels audience is begging for it. So we're going to be tossing it up there. Keep a lookout for that. But we have a draft coming for you today, and this is going to be kind of one that might be a little hard to wrap your head around, so I'm going to explain it best as possible.
Give it a good shout here.
But the way that we described it was mythical player eras, which isn't really the best way to do it, but basically what we're getting at is these are our favorite eras of players on a team or during a year, or players that just went on a run during a certain period of time. Not necessarily the best, because if it was the best, it would be, Heat LeBron
James, yeah.
Michael Jordan Bulls.
Right.
But our favorite in terms of just having fun to watch.
Correct.
Player runs in the NBA.
Yeah.
So should I flip a coin?
Yeah, flip a coin. Flip one up. Let's go.
All right, I have a quarter here.
Okay.
Heads. Tails.
Mm-hmm.
Call it in the air, okay?
Yep. Tails.
That is heads, which means that I'm going first.
Very unfortunate.
And with my first pick, I am going to be taking Mythical Players Draft. My first player, I am taking Brandon Roy on the Trailblazers.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. That is definitely a deep cut, deeper than I was expecting us to go here. Yeah, good pick. I'm gonna have some more mainstream people, but Brandon Roy in his 4-year career with the Trailblazers, it just kind of goes to show you like how great that team would have been if they had a guy like Greg Oden stay healthy and Brandon Roy stay healthy, and then add on Damian Lillard a couple of years after that,
and LaMarcus Aldridge,
would
have been a great team.
And
CJ McCollum would have been a great team.
Would have been a really, really good future for them. But yeah, that's a good pick at number 1. I'm gonna go a little bit more mainstream here and take a seasonal player, a player that really produced for one big season. And I'm taking triple-double Westbrook from 2016 to 2017.
Oh, you really did go more mainstream. I wasn't thinking about that at all.
Yeah.
We went down completely different lanes for this.
I don't hate that. I don't hate that we're on different planes.
We might not overlap once.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right. I'm here.
All right. You have second pick.
I have second pick.
Yeah.
I'm also going to take probably my favorite mythical player for an entire season. A guy that I like to talk about all the time. And anytime that I think about this run, it just brings back memories. I'm taking Raptors Kawhi here.
Okay, good pick. Yeah, that's a good pick. Okay. Objectively speaking. I'm actually going to counter you with one that's pretty similar. I'm going to be taking Paul George on the Pacers.
I like it.
Preferably number 24,
Yep.
but I'm taking number 13 by association as well.
Fine. I don't hate that at all. Certainly one of the best versions of PG that we've ever seen. And yeah, great player.
So with my third pick, I'm going to go down a very similar route again, but kick it back a little bit further. I'm going to be taking Dwight Howard on the Orlando Magic.
Okay. I like that. Good player, MVP, you know.
Right, yeah, great player.
Good stuff. This one's going to hit a little bit near and dear for you and I. I'm going to take Celtics Isaiah Thomas off the board.
It's a great pick.
Guy who just got signed by the Suns, you know, I'm super excited for him. It's great to see him back in the league. And yeah, looking forward to seeing if he can do some damage.
I had him on the list, but I had a feeling that he is a little nearer and dearer to your heart than he is to mine. So I figured that it would be wrong to not
I had to
have
take
him.
I have it again then, right?
Yeah, you have it again.
It would feel weird to be drafting mythical players and not take Game 6 Clay. So I'm going to throw him on my list here. A guy who always shows up in Game 6 of any NBA playoffs. And although, you know, we're seeing the fall off of Klay Thompson before our eyes here, you got to remember the good times, and Game 6 play is coming to my team here.
I have two really strange ones that I don't necessarily know will hit with our audience.
Okay.
To round out my draft.
I want to hear them, though.
At my number 4, I have Tyreke Evans on the Kings.
Wow, I like it. I also had a King, but I'm gonna leave that for honorable mentions, I think, now. But good pick. Rookie of the Year, Tyreke Evans.
This one's really strange.
Okay.
My 5th player is Nate Robinson in the dunk contest.
Interesting. I like the way you thought about this. You want to know why I like the way you thought about this?
Why?
Because my 5th pick and a guy that was on my list is Aaron Gordon in the dunk contest.
he only didn't even win the dunk.
I don't care.
All right, I guess we were on similar. Wavelengths. Nate Robinson won 3 of them.
Yeah, Nate Robinson was a different animal, but I mean, I don't think anybody can contest the fact that Aaron Gordon is one of the greatest dunkers we've ever seen.
He's a monster in the dunk contest.
All right, so run me through your list again, and then we'll do some honorable mentions to wrap this up.
All right, at 1, I have Brandon Roy on the Trailblazers.
Yep.
At 2, I have PG on the Pacers. 3, I have Dwight Howard on the Magic. 4, I have Tyreke Evans on the Kings. And 5, I have Nate Robinson in the dunk contest.
Okay. I got number 1, triple-double Westbrook, 2016-2017. Number 2, I got Raptors Kawhi. Number 3, I got Celtics Isaiah Thomas. Number 4, I have Game 6 Klay Thompson. And number 5, I have Aaron Gordon in the dunk contest.
So,
do you have any honorable mentions?
I have 2 honorable mentions.
Okay, hit me with them.
Do you have any?
I do. I have a couple.
All right. We'll go one at a time. My first one, kind of niche. I have TJ Warren in the bubble.
Yep. Wasn't on the list, but certainly a 1 or 2 week legendary run there for TJ Warren. I had Raptors DeMar DeRozan, slightly behind Kawhi. I think that was a great period in time for Toronto, and then obviously they get the ring, so you got to knock them down a peg. But yeah, good times in Toronto then.
And then my last one that I had was Linsanity.
That would have been a great pick.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. That would have been
But wasn't he
that is
have
a
any
massive miss.
He didn't really have any
miss. I don't know how he didn't pick Linsanity.
He didn't have any kind of like personal, because like as Celtics fans we hate the Knicks. When Linsanity was doing well, I was like, yeah, but he's a Knicks player, you know, like so like I didn't really love him that much, but the rest of the guys are so far away from, like, we only played the rest of the guys like twice a year, so I didn't really have to worry about them.
I guess. I don't know. I think if you have Linsanity on your list, you really set yourself apart. What a fantastic 2-week run in the NBA.
Yeah, it really was.
I mean, he got like a 10-year career out of that. Out of a 2-week
5
run.
NBA teams.
It's absurd. But
he was part of a big 3 because of that run.
That's pretty awesome.
My mind.
That's pretty awesome. That's something to think about. I have a couple more, actually. I have Sacramento Kings DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah, Boogie. He was a big passer. Underrated passer.
Agreed. I also had Pelicans DeMarcus Cousins because I thought one of those two would be gone. But both good players. obviously. And then another mythical, I had playoff Jimmy Butler, but we can't draft that.
Oh, you know what? I had another one. I had Pistons Andre Drummond.
Wow. Okay. I don't hate that.
Low-key really good.
You know, another one for that would be Pistons Blake Griffin.
Yeah, for like the 2 seasons he played there.
He was dirty on the Pistons.
Jared Dudley on the Nets.
Oh, good one. Ben
D'Lo
Simmons
on the Nets.
Ben Simmons on the 76ers. Karis LeVert on the Nets.
Yep.
Would have been a good one.
Jalen Brunson on the Mavericks?
Possibly.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
There are a lot. There's a lot of good ones. And then
we might have to do this one again with a fully new roster.
Just
really niche
NBA players.
NBA players.
And then my last one was double step back James Harden.
Yeah, I had double step back James Harden. I did not want to whip it out. He was like the first player that came to mind.
But no, that was fun. I mean, I like the open for interpretation aspect of that draft, but we can definitely like shrink it down to like LA Clippers JJ Redick or like something random like that.
Or like Hito Turkoglu.
Yeah, Hito Turkoglu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like the 2017 Wizards. Yeah. There's so many teams out there. All right, well, that'll wrap up this episode. As always, thank you for listening. This has been The Corner Office, and I'm Jack Byrne.
And I'm Alex Penders.